A new beginning. The call reached Noah as he contemplated a lukewarm tea, his gaze adrift on the rain-streaked pane of his small flat. His agent's voice, typically a staccato burst of information, now bubbled with uncharacteristic glee. Noah, you landed it. The lead. Anya Sharma wants you. The mug nearly slipped from his grasp. The lead? Opposite Sebastian Thorne? His usual quiet murmur was reduced to a breathless whisper. He'd meticulously researched Thorne, of course. The industry's golden boy. The magnetic heartthrob. An actor whose very name guaranteed box office triumph. Noah, in stark contrast, was an indie darling. Critically lauded but largely unknown to the broader public. The chasm between them felt utterly surreal. A dream too audacious to have ever conceived. Yes, Noah. Opposite Sebastian Thorne, they adored your audition. Sharma said you imbued the character with a vulnerability that was precisely what was needed. The agent rattled off dates, contractual terms, and a salary figure that sent Noah's head spinning. He hung up, the receiver a weighty object in his hand. The rain outside now a triumphant drum roll against the glass. A starring role, a major motion picture. It marked a terrifying, exhilarating genesis. The week preceding, the first table read, dissolved into a blur of script analysis and gnawing self-doubt. Noah highlighted passages, scribbled marginalia, and rehearsed scenes before his mirror, relentlessly seeking the emotional core of each line. His character, Elias, a reclusive astronomer, found his life irrevocably altered by the arrival of Thorne's Julian, an enigmatic artist. Theirs was a narrative of unexpected fusion, of two disparate souls drawn together by an unseen current. The weight of expectation pressed in, not just from the studio, but from himself. He had to excel. He had to be extraordinary. On the morning of the read, Noah dressed with uncharacteristic deliberation. A crisp dark blue shirt, charcoal trousers. He raked a hand through his perpetually disheveled brown hair, attempting to impose order. His heart hammered a nervous rhythm against his ribs as he stepped into the spacious, brightly lit conference room. The air was thick with the aroma of fresh coffee and a palpable hum of anticipation. Anya Sharma, her silver hair coiled into a severe bun, presided at the head of the long table, her keen eyes sweeping the gathering. Beside her, Leo Chen, the film's calm and efficient producer, meticulously arranged stacks of scripts. Noah drew a steadying breath and claimed an empty chair several seats down. Carefully positioning his script before him, he recognized a few faces, seasoned character actors, crew members glimpsed in industry publications. And then there was Sebastian Thorne. He was even more striking in person. Sebastian exuded an effortless elegance, a dark linen shirt open just enough to hint at the lean musculature beneath, a genuine warmth in his smile as he greeted others around the table. He moved with an easy confidence, a natural magnetism that commanded every eye. Noah felt a familiar shyness wash over him, prompting a subtle withdrawal, watching from the periphery. Sebastian's gaze swept the room, then settled on Noah. His smile broadened. "You must be Noah," he said, his voice a rich baritone carrying effortlessly. He rose and walked over, extending a hand. "Sebastian Thorne, it's a genuine pleasure to finally meet you." Noah stood, a blush creeping up his neck. His hand felt small within Sebastian's firm grasp. "Noah Ellis, the pleasure's all mine, Sebastian." His voice was a little breathy, softer than intended. Sebastian chuckled, a low, easy sound. "No need for formalities, Noah. We'll be spending a lot of time together. Call me Seb." He squeezed Noah's hand reassuringly before releasing it. "I've heard wonderful things about your work." Anya was practically raving. He leaned in conspiratorially. "Apparently, you made her cry during your audition." Noah's cheeks burned. "Oh, I hope that's a good thing." Sebastian's eyes, a startling shade of hazel, sparkled with amusement. "With Anya, it's always a good thing. Means you hit a nerve. That's what we aim for, isn't it?" He winked, then returned to his seat, leaving Noah feeling slightly dazed and unexpectedly comforted. Anya clapped her hands, her voice cutting through the soft murmur. "All right, everyone, settle down. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Leo, please distribute the revised pages." Leo efficiently passed out a few new scenes, just minor tweaks, mostly dialogue punctuation, he murmured. Anya's gaze fixed on Noah and Sebastian. Noah, Sebastian, thank you for embracing this. This story, Elias and Julian's journey, is about discovering beauty and truth in unforeseen places. It's about connection, and I have a strong feeling the two of you will imbue it with something truly extraordinary. Her eyes, though intense, held a glint of excitement. Let's begin, shall we? Page 1. Noah drew a deep breath, the lingering scent of coffee grounding him, and opened his script. He sensed Sebastian's presence across the table, a warm, vibrant energy. He focused on the words, the character, pushing down the nervousness, ready to immerse himself in Elias's world. This was it. The real work commenced now. First sparks. The cavernous rehearsal space, usually a stark white box, had been softened with a scattering of worn sofas, a coffee station, and a few potted plants. Attempting to mimic a living room, Noah, still slightly awed by Sebastian's proximity, tried to focus on Anya's instructions. All right, let's start with Dr. Eris Thorne's first interaction with Asher Vance's character. Anya's voice, calm and precise, cut through the low hum of the air conditioning. Asher, you're trying to secure a rare astronomical artifact from Eris, who's famously reclusive. Remember, Eris, you're wary. Asher, you're charming, almost disarmingly so. Noah, as Eris nodded, clutching his script. Sebastian, as Asher, simply grinned, a flash of pure charisma that made Noah's stomach flutter. The initial scenes were straightforward, the kind of dialogue-heavy exchanges that required more mental agility than emotional depth. Sebastian was a natural, embodying Asher's confident, easygoing nature with an almost effortless grace. He'd crack jokes between takes, his booming laugh filling the room, putting everyone at ease. He'd playfully nudge Noah's shoulder when Aris delivered a particularly stubborn line, or offer a shared glance of exasperation when Anya pushed for yet another subtle inflection. Noah found himself relaxing, even smiling genuinely, something he rarely did during early rehearsals. Sebastian made it feel less like work and more like play, a high-stakes improv session with an incredibly talented partner. Leo Chen, the producer, moved silently around the periphery, occasionally distributing revised pages with a quiet efficiency that belied the controlled chaos of filmmaking. Anya, ever watchful, offered minimal notes, seemingly content with the developing rhythm between her leads. After lunch, the mood in the room shifted. Anya clapped her hands, her expression more serious. Okay, let's move into the apartment scenes. Pages 47 to 52. Asher's managed to weasel his way into Aris's observatory apartment. This is where the dynamic really starts to change. Aris, you're uncomfortable with his presence, but also intrigued. Asher, you're sensing that crack in his shell, pushing at it gently. Noah felt a familiar knot tighten in his chest. These were the scenes requiring proximity, the ones where Aris and Asher began to navigate the unspoken spaces between them. He took a deep breath, trying to channel Aris's guarded nature. Sebastian, however, seemed to slide into Asher's skin with an unsettling ease. When Asher first stepped into Aris's meticulously ordered apartment, Sebastian moved closer to Noah, invading his personal space just enough to convey Asher's charming disregard for boundaries. Noah felt a subtle shift in the air, a crackle of something new. Lines, Sebastian, Anya prompted, pulling them back from the edge of the scene. They ran through the sequence where Asher attempts to explain a piece of his art to Aris, leaning over his shoulder to point out a detail in a sketch. Sebastian's arm brushed Noah's, a fleeting contact that sent a jolt down Noah's spine. He tried to remember Aris's discomfort, but a part of him just registered the warmth, the solid presence. Later, as Asher tries to convince Aris to let him stay for a drink, Sebastian stepped closer, lowering his voice, his gaze unwavering. Just one, he murmured, his eyes holding Noah's for a beat too long. It wasn't the usual quick glance exchanged between actors. It was a lingering, searching look, as if Sebastian was trying to find something beneath Noah's carefully constructed composure. Noah felt his cheeks flush. He knew it was acting, of course. A calculated move by Sebastian to elicit the right reaction from him as Aris. Yet the intensity of that gaze felt incredibly real. A physical pressure that made his breath catch. He managed to deliver his line, a clipped refusal, but the words felt clumsy, forced, Anya, who hadn't missed the moment, simply hummed. Good, she said, a subtle satisfaction in her tone. Let's try that again, Noah. Aris, you're still resisting, but there's a flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark. As they reset, Sebastian offered Noah a small, reassuring smile, but his eyes still held a hint of that earlier intensity, a knowing glint that made Noah's heart thump against his ribs. The playful ease from the morning had been replaced by something more intricate, more charged. The rehearsal space, once a comfortingly neutral territory, now felt imbued with an electric hum, a nascent tension that was both exhilarating and unnerving. Closer than expected. All right, let's try that again, the director's voice boomed from behind the monitor. Aris, you're distraught. Asher, you're the anchor. Comfort him. Noah took a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering unease from the previous scene. He was Aris, his world crumbling. Sebastian, as Asher stepped forward, his expression softening with a practiced concern. Noah could feel the weight of Sebastian's gaze, a familiar intensity that always seemed to cut a little deeper than it should. Come here, Sebastian murmured, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through the air between them. He opened his arms, and Noah, as Aris, stumbled into them. It was supposed to be a simple, comforting embrace, a quick squeeze, a pat on the back, but Sebastian's arms wrapped around him, pulling him flush against his chest. Noah's face was pressed against Sebastian's shoulder, inhaling a subtle, appealing scent, something clean and vaguely spicy. The hug stretched, a beat longer than necessary. Noah could feel the solid breath of Sebastian's chest, the steady rhythm of his heart against his own. His own heart, surprisingly, gave a little thump in response, a quick, involuntary flutter. He felt the firm pressure of Sebastian's hand on his back, not just a supportive touch, but a sustained hold. It felt less like an actor comforting another and more like something else, something warm and surprisingly intimate. When Sebastian finally loosened his grip, Noah pulled away, a faint blush creeping up his neck. He hoped the cameras wouldn't pick up the sudden heat in his cheeks. Later that afternoon, they were filming a scene where Asher and Aris, having endured a harrowing ordeal, finally found a moment of quiet solace. The script called for their characters to sit side by side, their hands clasped in a silent show of support and solidarity. Just a simple handhold, guys, the director instructed, his voice gentler now. Let the connection speak for itself. Noah positioned himself on the rustic wooden bench, waiting. Sebastian sat down beside him, their thighs brushing briefly. A small electric current seemed to pass between them. Then, Sebastian reached for Noah's hand. His fingers were long and strong, his palm warm and calloused from what? Guitar strings? Fencing practice? Noah wasn't sure, but the touch was firm, enveloping. He felt the subtle texture of Sebastian's skin, the faint ridge of a knuckle, the surprising tenderness of his thumb as it brushed over Noah's. It wasn't just a prop in a scene. It was a living, breathing connection. Noah found himself acutely aware of the warmth emanating from Sebastian's hand, a comforting heat that spread through his own fingers, up his arm, and settled somewhere in his chest. He focused on it, on the simple, profound act of holding another person's hand, letting the sensation ground him. He could almost forget they were acting, that these were characters, that this wasn't real. The take ended, and Sebastian's hand lingered for a moment longer than necessary before he gently released Noah's. Noah found himself missing the contact almost immediately. Back in his trailer, the quiet hum of the air conditioning did little to dissipate the new buzz in his mind. Noah peeled off his costume, his thoughts replaying the day's interactions, the hug, the handhold. They were just scenes, of course. Sebastian was a professional known for his immersive performances. He committed fully, embodied his characters with a singular intensity. That's what made him so good, so celebrated. But there was a subtle shift in those moments today, a genuine quality to the touch, a lingering warmth that felt less like performance and more like something else. Noah tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it as his own overthinking, the natural consequence of working in such close proximity, of blurring the lines between self and character. Yet, he couldn't shake the awareness that had settled deep within him, an awareness of Sebastian, not just as a colleague, but as a presence that was becoming increasingly palpable, increasingly closer than expected. He looked at his hand, still feeling the phantom imprint of Sebastian's warmth. It was a strange, unsettling sensation, this new kind of perception, and Noah wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. After hours practice, the invitation materialized during a casual lunch break, sliding into the easy rhythm of their day. Sebastian leaned across the catering table, his voice a low, gravelly suggestion. Noah, I was thinking, the latter half of the script, those emotional arcs, they're quite intricate. How about we run lines after hours? Just us, to really inhabit the roles without the pressure of the full crew. Noah's fork paused midair, a piece of roasted chicken forgotten. The sudden hushed intimacy of the proposal that pointed just us ignited an unexpected warmth within him. He swallowed, perhaps a tad too quickly. Yeah, Sebastian. That sounds beneficial. When were you considering? Tonight? My place is a stone's throw from the studio. We could grab some takeout, make an evening of it. Sebastian's smile was disarmingly effortless, a flash of bright white against his sun-kissed skin. Thus, Noah later found himself perched on the edge of a plush, cream-colored sofa in Sebastian's impeccably minimalist apartment. City lights shimmered through the expansive windows, a distant urban hum replacing the controlled chaos of the soundstage. Untouched takeout containers sat between them on a low coffee table awaiting their attention. The script, heavily annotated with their individual markings, lay open, a silent guide. Any initial awkwardness quickly gave way to a singular, focused intensity. They plunged into scene after scene, the dialogue flowing, their characters, Oris and Asher, breathing tangible life into the hushed space. Sebastian's apartment, typically a sanctuary of celebrity privacy, transformed into an intimate stage for their unfolding drama. As they transitioned into a particularly raw confrontation between Eris and Asher, a scene demanding profound vulnerability and a degree of physical proximity, Sebastian subtly shifted, leaning closer. His knee brushed Noah's, a spark of contact. The air between them thickened, charged with an undeniable, unspoken energy. Noah inhaled Sebastian's subtle cologne, a woody, clean scent now inextricably linked with the character of Asher. Eris, Sebastian began, his voice deepening into Asher's husky register. You can't just walk away from this. Not now. Not after everything. He extended a hand mirroring a stage direction, hovering mere inches from Noah's arm. A tremor ran through Noah. This felt profoundly different from the set, stripped bare of crew, of glaring lights, of cameras. It felt real. He responded as Aris, his own voice tinged with the character's conflicted agony. What do you want me to say, Asher? That I regret it? That I wish none of this ever happened? Sebastian's gaze intensified, his typically bright eyes now clouded with an emotion too potent for mere rehearsal. He paused, his line momentarily lost. A beat of silence stretched, taut and electric. Noah prompted him gently. Sebastian, your line. I want you to admit. Sebastian blinked, a slow, deliberate motion, as if resurfacing from a deep trance. A flush crept up his neck. Right. Sorry. Lost in it for a second there. He cleared his throat, but his eyes, when they re-engaged Noah's, still held that unsettling intensity. I want you to admit that you felt something too. They pressed on, the scene growing more intricate, more emotionally demanding. At one point, Aris was meant to pull away from Asher, but Asher, in his desperation, was to hold him fast. On the page, it was a struggle, a push and pull. In Sebastian's apartment, and as Noah began to lean back, Sebastian's hand shot out, not to his arm, but to his wrist, holding him with surprising strength. His thumb brushed over Noah's pulse point. The contact was electric, a jolt. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. He couldn't tear his gaze from Sebastian's face, from the raw, searching expression that seemed to transcend Asher's lines. Again, Sebastian faltered, his eyes locked on Noah's, the script momentarily forgotten. "Sebastian," Noah whispered, his voice barely a breath. Sebastian's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. He finally wrenched his gaze from Noah's, looking down at the script as if physically anchoring himself back into the scene. "Sorry," he muttered again, his voice rougher this time. "Just really getting into Asher tonight. He's a lot, huh?" He released Noah's wrist, but the ghost of his touch lingered, a brand against Noah's skin. The remainder of the practice unfolded in a similar vein, punctuated by Sebastian's momentary lapses, those unsettling pauses where his character seemed to bleed into something deeply personal. Noah found himself growing increasingly aware of Sebastian's proximity, the subtle brush of their knees, the faint, persistent scent of his cologne. He, too, was becoming lost, not just in Aris, but in the intoxicating, unsettling pull of Sebastian Thorne. The boundaries between acting and reality, between Eris and Asher, between Noah and Sebastian, were blurring with alarming speed. A glimpse of truth. The set was quiet, hushed by a collective breath held. Anya's voice, usually a sharp whip, was a low hum as she directed the lighting adjustments. Today was the scene where Elias finally confessed his love for Julian, a pivotal moment of vulnerability after weeks of simmering tension. Noah felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd practiced the lines, but the emotional weight of them, delivered to Sebastian, was a different beast entirely. Sebastian, as Julian stood across from him, the soft key light catching the subtle curve of his jaw. His eyes, usually so bright and commanding, held a fragile intensity. I didn't know what to do without you," he began, his voice a raw whisper that vibrated through the silent soundstage. "It was like the color drained from everything." Noah, as Elias, took a breath, trying to match Sebastian's sincerity. "Julian." Sebastian stepped closer, his gaze locking onto Noah's. There was a flicker, a tremor in his expression that went beyond the character. It was as if a curtain had been drawn back, revealing something deeply personal, aching. His eyes, usually a vibrant blue, seemed to deepen, to cloud over. They welled, not quite spilling over, but shimmering with an emotion so potent it stole Noah's breath. It wasn't Sebastian acting as Julian, it was Sebastian being Julian, and in that moment the distinction dissolved. Anya, perched on her director's chair, was utterly still, her gaze fixed on the monitor. No one moved. The air thrummed with the unspoken. Sebastian reached out, his hand hovering inches from Noah's cheek, then dropped, as if the touch was too much, too real. "I love you, Elias," he choked out, the words thick with a palpable sorrow and longing. "I love you more than I thought possible." Noah's own eyes stung. He felt a profound sense of connection, a recognition of something that resonated deeply within him. It was a terrifying, exhilarating current that flowed between them, electric and undeniable. "Cut!" Anya's voice, when it finally came, was soft, almost reverent. The spell shattered. Sebastian blinked, his shoulders hunching slightly. He didn't look at Noah. Instead, he turned abruptly, his face pale, and walked with rapid strides toward the edge of the set. "I need a break," he called out, his voice tight, lacking its usual melodious quality. He disappeared through a side door without a backward glance. A collective murmur rippled through the crew. Noah stood rooted, a strange mix of exhilaration and confusion swirling within him. What had that been? The intensity of Sebastian's performance had been breathtaking, but the abrupt departure felt like a sharp slap. "Noah, that was incredible," Anya said, her voice cutting through the lingering atmosphere. She walked over, her expression unreadable. "Truly. Take 5. Noah nodded, his mind replaying the scene, Sebastian's watery eyes, the raw tremor in his voice. He found himself walking instinctively toward the side door Sebastian had used. The corridor was quiet, leading to a small, seldom used green room. The door was ajar. He pushed it open gently. Sebastian stood by the single window, his back to Noah, staring out at the hazy city skyline. His posture was stiff, almost rigid. The golden boy, the charismatic heartthrob, looked profoundly alone. "Sebastian," Noah ventured, his voice softer than he intended. Sebastian didn't turn immediately. His shoulders remained hunched. "Noah," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. He finally pivoted, his eyes still holding a residue of the emotion from the scene, but now tinged with something else, a deep unease. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "Are you all right?" Noah asked, genuinely concerned. Sebastian's gaze met his, troubled and distant. "Sometimes acting feels too real, doesn't it?" he mused, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked away again, back at the indifferent cityscape, as if searching for an answer in its concrete expanse. Growing distance. The days that followed, Anya's tearful praise and Sebastian's hasty retreat, were marked by a subtle, yet undeniable shift. The boisterous energy that usually emanated from Sebastian, a warmth that had become a comforting constant for Noah, seemed to recede, replaced by a quiet thoughtfulness. He was still professional, still hit his marks with precision, but the easy camaraderie, the shared jokes and lingering glances had evaporated. Noah felt its absence keenly, a quiet ache that settled in his chest. Where once Sebastian would seek him out between takes, offering a quick smile or a playful nudge, now he'd drift towards the edge of the set, often engrossed in his phone or engaged in low-voiced conversations with crew members Noah didn't recognize. Their scenes together, particularly the less emotionally charged ones, now felt contained. The spark that had ignited their earlier performances, the unspoken current that had flowed between them, was muted. It wasn't hostility, not exactly, but a deliberate distance, as if an invisible barrier had been erected, permeable enough for professional interaction but impenetrable for anything more. Noah found himself watching Sebastian more often, trying to decipher the unreadable expression that now often veiled his striking features. Was it exhaustion, discomfort, or was it regret? The raw vulnerability Sebastian had displayed in that pivotal scene, the profound confession of "sometimes acting feels too real," echoed in Noah's mind, a fragile secret they now shared. But instead of drawing them closer, it seemed to have pushed Sebastian further away. One afternoon, during a lull in filming, Chloe Davis, Sebastian's publicist, approached him. She moved with an effortless grace, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She wasn't wearing her usual impeccably tailored power suits, opting instead for a flowing silk blouse and tailored trousers, but her aura of confident control remained. "Sebastian," she began, her voice a smooth blend of concern and professional inquiry. "You've been unusually quiet these past few days. Everything all right?" Sebastian, who had been absently tracing patterns on a prop table with his finger, looked up, a flicker of something unidentifiable in his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Just tired, Chloe. Long hours." He offered a small, unconvincing smile. Chloe's gaze, however, lingered. She was adept at reading between the lines, at discerning the subtle shifts in her client's moods that could signal potential PR issues. Sebastian, the golden boy, was rarely just tired, in a way that visibly impacted his effervescent persona. His quietness felt uncharacteristic. Noah, pretending to be engrossed in his script a few feet away, subtly angled his ear towards their conversation. He saw Chloe's brow furrow almost imperceptibly as she studied Sebastian. "Well, you know the drill," she said, her tone softening slightly. "Hollywood loves a good story, and a tired leading man isn't usually the one they're looking for. Just Pace yourself. We're still on schedule for that cover shoot next month." Sebastian merely nodded, his gaze drifting back to the prop table, the brief animation in his expression replaced by that same quiet reserve. Chloe, sensing she wouldn't get more out of him, gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh, a testament to her honed instincts, and then moved on, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Noah felt a pang of something akin to loss. The easy intimacy they had forged, the magnetic pull that had defined their early interactions, now felt like a distant memory. Sebastian was still there, physically present, but the essence of him, the vibrant, open man Noah had come to know, seemed to have retreated behind a newly constructed wall. And Noah, for the first time, felt a profound loneliness on a set that had once hummed with shared excitement. The space between them, once vibrant with unspoken connection, now felt vast and empty. Almost a kiss. The set hummed with a different kind of energy that morning, a nervous tremor underlying the usual pre-shoot bustle. Today was the day for the big love scene, the one where Caleb, racked with guilt and longing, finally confessed his feelings to Ethan, who has been quietly pining for him. It was meant to be the emotional climax of the first act, a raw, vulnerable moment. Anya had spent hours in rehearsal pushing them for authenticity, demanding they strip away artifice and expose the beating heart of their characters. Noah felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The recent chill from Sebastian had made every interaction feel like walking on thin ice. Their on-screen connection, once so effortless, now required a conscious effort to rekindle. He worried the scene would fall flat, a pale imitation of the genuine spark they'd once shared. Sebastian, usually so gregarious, was unusually quiet, his usual playful banter replaced by focused intensity. He paced the small, artificially lit apartment set, running lines under his breath, occasionally glancing at Noah with an unreadable expression. The air between them, thick with unspoken tension, was almost palpable. Anya, perched on her director's chair, watched them with an eagle eye. "All right, gentlemen," she announced, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Let's get this. Scene 43, take 1. The cameras rolled. The lights blazed, hot and unforgiving. Noah, as Ethan, sat on the edge of the faux leather couch, his gaze fixed on Sebastian. Sebastian, as Caleb moved towards him slowly, the weight of his character's confession heavy on his shoulders. I can't pretend anymore, Ethan." Sebastian's voice was a low rasp, thick with emotion. Everything we've been through, it means something, to me." He knelt before Noah, his eyes, usually so bright, now clouded with a raw vulnerability that made Noah's breath catch. Noah, as Ethan, was meant to be surprised, then overwhelmed. But Sebastian's intensity was so potent, so real, that Noah found himself genuinely reeling. It wasn't just Caleb's confession. It felt like something deeper, something true, was simmering beneath Sebastian's performance. Sebastian reached out, his hand gently cupping Noah's jaw. His thumb traced the line of Noah's cheekbone, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through Noah's system. His gaze, usually so controlled, was unfocused, his pupils dilated. He leaned in, closer than they'd ever rehearsed, closer than the script dictated. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. He could feel Sebastian's breath on his lips, warm and shallow. The scent of him, something fresh, like cypress and rain, filled Noah's senses. Their eyes locked, and in that charged silence, a universe of unspoken feelings seemed to converge. Noah saw a flicker of something in Sebastian's eyes, not Caleb's longing, but Sebastian's own unadulterated yearning. It was raw, exposed, and terrifyingly real. Sebastian closed the remaining distance, his lips barely an inch from Noah's. Noah's eyes fluttered shut, his body rigid with anticipation. The moment stretched, electric and breathless. "Cut!" Anya's voice, sharp and sudden, sliced through the air like a knife. Noah's eyes snapped open. Sebastian recoiled as if burned, his hand dropping from Noah's face. A flush crept up his neck, staining his cheeks a vivid crimson. He stumbled back a step, looking everywhere but at Noah. Anya stood, her expression unreadable. "Sebastian," she said, her tone level. "We discussed the blocking. That's a powerful moment, but not yet a kiss." Sebastian winced. "Right. My apologies, Anya. Got a little carried away." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact with Noah. "Apologies, Noah. I just felt the moment." His voice was a little too loud, a little too quick. A heavy silence descended upon the set. Leo, the producer, appeared as if from nowhere, passing revised pages to a bewildered assistant. The crew exchanged knowing glances, a ripple of hushed whispers spreading through the room. Noah stood frozen, the phantom warmth of Sebastian's breath still on his lips, the echo of an almost kiss reverberating in the sudden, deafening quiet. The avoidance. The next morning on set, the air, usually thick with the buzzing energy of production, felt strangely thin around Noah. He arrived early, hoping to catch Sebastian, to somehow address the electric silence that had followed their almost kiss. But Sebastian wasn't in his trailer. He was already on set, laughing boisterously with one of the sound engineers, a wide, easy smile plastered across his face. It was the kind of smile Noah had come to associate with their private moments, not a casual interaction with a crew member. A peculiar knot tightened in Noah's stomach. He watched Sebastian for a moment, a pang of something akin to loneliness piercing through him. Sebastian's head was thrown back, his dark hair catching the artificial light of the studio. He looked vibrant, unaffected, as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired yesterday. Noah swallowed, the lingering phantom pressure of Sebastian's breath on his lips, a stark contrast to the distant tableau unfolding before him. Noah made his way to the catering table, pouring himself a lukewarm coffee, his gaze constantly drifting towards Sebastian. He saw him move from the sound team to the props department, then to Anya, engaging in animated conversation with each, his gestures expansive and friendly. His usual warmth, it seemed, was being distributed everywhere but towards Noah. He tried to catch Sebastian's eye once, as Sebastian was walking past the camera crane, talking intently to the cinematographer. Noah held his breath, a silent plea in his gaze. For a split second, Sebastian's eyes flickered in his direction, a brief, unreadable flash. Then, almost imperceptibly, his head turned, his focus snapping back to the cinematographer, the conversation resuming without missing a beat. The dismissal was subtle, yet absolute. The sting of it was sharper than Noah had anticipated. It wasn't just distance. It was an active avoidance, a deliberate wall erected between them. The easy camaraderie they had cultivated, the unspoken understanding that had grown between them seemed to have evaporated overnight. It was as if the Sebastian who had leaned in so close, who had looked at him with such raw intensity, had never existed. Throughout the day, the pattern continued. Sebastian was everywhere, yet nowhere near Noah. During breaks, he'd find excuses to be at the other end of the set, or immersed in a conversation with someone else. When they had scenes together, Sebastian's professionalism was impeccable, almost too perfect. He hit every mark, delivered every line with precision, but the underlying current, the charged energy that usually flowed between them, was conspicuously absent. His eyes, in character, met Noah's, but the spark, the unspoken dialogue that had always existed beneath the script, was gone. It was like performing with a highly skilled, incredibly attractive automaton. Noah found himself retreating into himself, the usual anticipation of filming replaced by a dull ache. He tried to rationalize it, to tell himself that Sebastian was just being professional, that the almost kiss had made him uncomfortable, and this was his way of re-establishing boundaries. but the sheer coldness of it, the complete lack of acknowledgement, felt like a betrayal. He thought of Sebastian's hands on his face, the intensity of his gaze, the words they had exchanged without speaking. It felt like a cruel trick, a beautiful illusion shattered. As the day drew to a close, and Sebastian offered a perfunctory generalized "good night, everyone" before disappearing into his trailer, Noah was left with a hollow feeling, a quiet understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them, leaving him adrift in its wake. Rainy day confession. The rain arrived with the ferocity of a sudden downpour, lashing against the windows of the soundstage. Noah watched it for a long moment, the rhythmic drumming against the glass, a counterpoint to the quiet hum of the industrial heating. Filming had been paused for a late lunch, but Noah hadn't felt hungry. The past few days had been a blur of forced smiles and carefully curated distance from Sebastian. Each interaction a stilted dance of professional courtesy that felt anything but. He'd excused himself, seeking refuge in one of the smaller, unused dressing rooms, a utilitarian space with a chipped mirror and a single uncomfortable armchair. The solitude was a balm, allowing him to unravel the tight coil of frustration and hurt that had taken root in his chest. He traced a finger over a condensation streak on the window, the chill seeping through the pane. The set, usually a hive of activity, was muted by the weather. The distant clatter of cutlery from the catering tent, the only real sound. He leaned back into the armchair, its worn fabric doing little to cushion his fatigue. He'd barely slept, the image of Sebastian's retreating back, the almost kiss, and the subsequent emotional whiplash replaying on a loop in his mind. A soft knock startled him, making him flinch. He hadn't heard anyone approach. Before he could respond, the door creaked open, revealing Sebastian. He looked different. The usual incandescent charm that seemed to emanate from him was dimmed, replaced by an unfamiliar gravity. His eyes, usually alight with an almost mischievous spark, were clouded, dark with an unspoken burden. He wasn't smiling. In fact, his expression was utterly serious, almost solemn. His usually impeccable hair was slightly damp, a stray strand falling across his forehead, and his shoulders were hunched as if against an invisible weight. "Noah," Sebastian said, his voice softer than Noah had ever heard it, devoid of its usual booming confidence. It was a tentative sound, almost fragile. Noah simply nodded, unable to summon any words. The tension in the room thickened, palpable as the humidity outside. Sebastian stepped inside, pushing the door shut with a quiet click that echoed in the small space. He didn't move towards the other chair, opting instead to remain standing, hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans. He shifted his weight, a nervous habit Noah hadn't noticed before. The air crackled with unspoken things. Noah braced himself, a knot forming in his stomach. Was this it? Was Sebastian going to apologize for his coldness? Or worse, was he going to try and explain it away, further cementing the impenetrable wall he'd erected between them? Sebastian took a deep, shuddering breath, his chest visibly expanding and then deflating. He looked at Noah, then away, then back again, his gaze searching, almost pleading. His jaw worked, as if he were trying to dislodge words that were stuck. The rain outside intensified, a crescendo of sound that seemed to punctuate Sebastian's silence. He ran a hand through his damp hair, a gesture of profound unease. I need to talk to you," Sebastian finally managed, his voice a low rumble, barely above a whisper. Each word felt heavy, fraught with a weight Noah couldn't yet comprehend. His eyes, when they met Noah's, were filled with an uncharacteristic vulnerability, a raw honesty that sent a shiver down Noah's spine. The unexpected truth. The air in the cramped dressing room thickened, heavy with the scent of old stage makeup and the nervous energy radiating from Sebastian. Noah, still perched on the edge of the worn armchair, felt a prickle of unease. He watched as Sebastian, usually so composed, ran a hand through his damp hair, his gaze skittering around the room before finally settling on Noah. The stormy weather outside seemed to mirror the tempest brewing between them. "Noah," Sebastian began, his voice a low rumble devoid of its usual theatrical flourish. He took a hesitant step forward, then stopped, as if caught in an invisible snare. "What happened out there, it wasn't just the script." Noah's breath hitched. He knew intellectually that the intensity of their scene had been unsettling, but to hear Sebastian acknowledge it, to strip away the veneer of professional detachment, was something else entirely. He simply nodded, his throat suddenly tight. Sebastian let out a ragged sigh, his shoulders slumping. "I've never felt this way before with a co-star. It's strange." The admission hung in the air, a fragile thing. He looked at Noah, his eyes, usually so bright and confident, now clouded with an unfamiliar vulnerability. The usual sparkle was gone, replaced by a raw honesty that sent a shiver down Noah's spine. "Strange how?" Noah managed, his voice barely a whisper. He felt a tremor in his hands, a sudden chill despite the stuffy room. Sebastian took another step, closing the small distance between them. He knelt unexpectedly beside Noah's chair, bringing them eye level. The proximity was startling, a familiar closeness in an entirely new context. Noah could see the faint stubble on Sebastian's jaw, the slight tremor in his lower lip. "Strange, like, I can't tell where the lines are anymore," Sebastian confessed, his voice dropping even lower, as if sharing a profound secret. "With you, it's different. It's not just the performance. It feels real." He paused, his gaze searching Noah's face, as if seeking confirmation, or perhaps forgiveness. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted to pull away, to create some distance from the overwhelming intimacy of the moment, but he was rooted to the spot, captivated by the raw emotion radiating from Sebastian. He'd seen Sebastian embody countless characters, charming and intense, but this Sebastian, unscripted and exposed, was a revelation. Sebastian swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to his hands, clasped loosely between his knees. The rain outside intensified, a drumming against the window pane that seemed to amplify the silence in the room. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible, a muffled confession. I think I'm falling for you, Noah. For real." The words, soft as they were, hit Noah with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed from his lungs. He stared at Sebastian, his mind reeling. Falling for him? For real? The thought was so utterly unexpected, so contrary to everything he had assumed about Sebastian Thorne, the industry's golden boy, the charismatic heartthrob known for a string of glamorous female partners. Noah's world tilted on its axis. He felt a dizzying mix of disbelief and a strange, unfamiliar surge of something akin to hope. The sudden, unvarnished honesty of the confession was overwhelming. He had anticipated an apology for the near kiss, an explanation for the subsequent coldness, perhaps even a professional discussion about their on-screen chemistry. But this was entirely different. This was Sebastian Thorne, stripped of his persona, laying bare a truth Noah hadn't dared to imagine. He could only stare, his mouth slightly agape, the unexpected truth hanging between them, a fragile, momentous thing. The rain outside continued its relentless rhythm, but in the small dressing room everything had gone quiet, suspended in the wake of Sebastian's revelation, a shared feeling. The air in the dressing room crackled, thick with Sebastian's confession. Noah's mind reeled, a kaleidoscope of past moments flashing before his eyes. The electric current of their first scene together, the raw vulnerability in Sebastian's gaze during the unscripted, almost kiss, the palpable tension that had hummed between them off camera. Every touch, every lingering glance, every shared laugh now replayed with a startling new context. "He's falling for me. The words echoed, not with disbelief, but with a quiet, blossoming understanding. A warmth spread through Noah's chest, chasing away the chill of uncertainty that had lingered since Sebastian's sudden withdrawal. It wasn't just the shock of the admission, but the profound relief that settled over him. He hadn't imagined it then. The magnetic pull, the way his breath hitched when Sebastian was near, the unsettling sense of rightness in their shared space. It hadn't been a figment of his imagination, or merely the blurring lines of their characters. It was real. He feels it too. Sebastian stood before him, still, vulnerable, his usual polished confidence stripped away to reveal a raw earnestness. His eyes, usually dancing with an almost mischievous spark, were now shadowed with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He looked uncertain, a rare sight that tugged at something deep within Noah. This was not Sebastian Thorne, the industry's golden boy, but Sebastian, a man laying bare his heart. Noah's gaze softened. He saw the subtle tremor in Sebastian's hand, where it rested on the vanity. The slight tremor in his voice when he'd spoken those life-altering words. It was a testament to the weight of his confession, the courage it had taken to voice feelings that had so clearly rattled him. Without a word, Noah slowly extended his own hand. His movements were deliberate, a silent language of care and consideration. He didn't rush, allowing the space between them to hum with unspoken emotions, giving Sebastian the time to process this quiet gesture. His fingers, slightly trembling, reached across the small divide. The touch was feather light at first, a tentative brush against the back of Sebastian's hand. Sebastian flinched almost imperceptibly, his eyes widening as he looked from Noah's face to their almost joined hands. A breath hitched in his throat, a silent question hanging in the air. Noah didn't break eye contact. His own eyes, usually guarded, were open and sincere, reflecting the burgeoning hope within him. He didn't need to speak. The message was clear in the gentle pressure he now applied. A silent invitation, a quiet affirmation. I understand. I feel it too. As their fingers finally intertwined, a jolt, soft yet undeniable, passed between them. It was a different kind of spark than the one that ignited between their characters on screen. A more profound, more personal connection. Sebastian's hand, so often expressive and animated, relaxed into Noah's grip, his thumb slowly stroking the back of Noah's knuckles. The unspoken acknowledgement hung in the air, a fragile, beautiful thing. There was no need for grand declarations, no immediate pressure for explanations or reassurances. In that simple, intimate contact, everything was understood. The confusion, the distance, the fear, all of it seemed to dissipate, replaced by a nascent sense of belonging. The dressing room, once a space of professional preparation, transformed into a sanctuary, a quiet corner where two souls had found an unexpected connection. A faint smile touched Noah's lips, mirroring the relief that washed over Sebastian's face. The tension, which had been a taut wire stretched between them for weeks, finally slackened, replaced by a shared breath, a shared heartbeat. The world outside the dressing room, with its demands and expectations, faded into the background. For a precious moment there was only them, two hands intertwined, two hearts finally in sync. The quiet hum of mutual understanding filled the space, promising a future as uncertain as it was thrilling. A true smile. Noah's breath caught, a silent testament to the fragile hope blossoming within him. Instinctively, his thumb brushed the back of Sebastian's hand, a feather-light confirmation of their nascent connection. The room's atmosphere, previously thick with unspoken emotions and stale coffee, seemed to shed its weight, infusing with a new, exhilarating promise. A familiar knot of anxiety tightened in Noah's stomach. Had he misread the moment? Was Sebastian's confession merely a fleeting impulse? Then, Sebastian squeezed back. Not a forceful grip, but a gentle, reassuring pressure that spoke volumes, echoing Noah's own vulnerability. A profound relief washed over Noah, potent enough to buckle his knees. The tension coiled in his shoulders for weeks, months even, began to unravel, leaving a strange, pleasant lightness. He looked up, meeting Sebastian's gaze, and for the first time truly saw him. The solemn intensity that had clouded Sebastian's features during his confession receded, replaced by something softer, warmer. Slowly, a small, genuine smile spread across Sebastian's face. This wasn't the dazzling, camera-ready grin offered to fans, nor the charming, polite curve used with colleagues. This was unvarnished, vulnerable, and utterly captivating. His eyes, usually alight with playful sparks or thoughtful depth, crinkled at the corners, revealing a warmth that mirrored the feel of his hand. The smile reached his eyes, making them glint with quiet joy, a shy relief that reflected Noah's own. It was a smile that seemed to declare, "Yes, this is real, all of it." In that moment, the city's noisy hum, the distant clatter of props, the faint scent of the studio's aged carpet all faded into insignificance. There was only the quiet space between them, charged with an electricity that transcended mere physical proximity. Their hands remained clasped, an anchor in the swirling sea of new emotions. Noah found himself mirroring Sebastian's smile, a quiet, elated curve of his own lips, acknowledging the seismic shift that had just occurred. An unfamiliar lightness bubbled inside him, a joy so pure it almost hurt. This was real. The longing, the confusion, the intense connection he'd felt. It wasn't just the magic of the script or the intensity of their craft. It was genuine. It was mutual. Sebastian's confession had shattered the carefully constructed walls around Noah's heart, and Sebastian's true, unburdened smile was the sun breaking through the clouds. They stood there for what felt like an eternity, yet only seconds had passed. The silence wasn't awkward. It was pregnant with unspoken understandings, with the weight of shared vulnerability and the exhilarating promise of what lay ahead. Noah's gaze lingered on Sebastian's face, tracing the lines around his eyes, the slight quirk of his lips. He wanted to commit this authentic expression of happiness, previously only hinted at, to memory. Sebastian's thumb began to move, stroking gently over Noah's knuckles, a tender, almost unconscious gesture that sent a shiver through him. This simple touch spoke volumes, confirming the depth of Sebastian's feelings and the sincerity of his confession. Amidst the ordinary chaos of a film set, something extraordinary had taken root. Their professional space had transformed into a sanctuary for burgeoning feelings, a quiet corner where intertwined hands solidified a bond no longer just about characters, but about two men. The future, once an uncertain blur, now shimmered with thrilling, hopeful clarity. The road ahead. The camera lens, an unblinking eye, presided over the set's hushed intimacy. Noah, still processing the raw vulnerability of Sebastian's confession, met his gaze across the staged living room. The script demanded a fragile reconciliation, a tentative rebuilding of trust. But between Noah and Sebastian, something far more profound was unfurling, a nascent understanding that resonated beneath the surface. Sebastian's usually vibrant eyes now held a remarkable depth, a warmth no longer feigned for the camera. It was a knowing acknowledgement of the seismic shift that had occurred between them. A blush crept up Noah's neck, a telltale flush he hoped the studio lights obscured. He reciprocated the look, a silent pledge in his own eyes, and for a fleeting instant, the script, the crew, the entire film dissolved. There was only Sebastian and the exhilarating, terrifying reality of their newfound connection. Anya's sharp, incisive voice pierced the quiet. Cut! Brilliant, both of you. That felt utterly authentic. Her praise, typically understated, carried a note of genuine surprise. She offered a quick, almost imperceptible nod before pivoting to confer with the DP about camera angles. Later, during a swift set change, Noah found himself lingering by the prop table, feigning absorption in a dust-laden tome. He sensed Sebastian's approach before he saw him, a subtle shift in the air, a familiar blend of spice and something uniquely his. A hand brushed Noah's, feather-light, then intertwined. Sebastian's fingers were a warm, firm, reassuring anchor. No words passed between them, but the message was unequivocally clear. This is real. We're doing this. Noah's gentle squeeze confirmed it. The faint trace of Sebastian's thumb on the back of his hand sent a jolt of giddy excitement through him. This was uncharted territory, a thrilling, terrifying plunge. He risked a glance at Sebastian, whose eyes were fixed on the bustling crew, a subtle smile playing on his lips. He appeared utterly at ease, as if holding Noah's hand were the most natural thing in the world. "We need to talk," Sebastian murmured, his voice a low hum, nearly lost amidst the ambient set noise. He released Noah's hand just as Chloe, Sebastian's publicist, approached, her smile tight. "Sebastian, darling, Anya needs you for a quick chat about tomorrow's schedule," Chloe announced, her gaze flitting between the two men, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Noah felt a prickle of unease. Chloe was notoriously perceptive, and her primary role was to safeguard Sebastian's public persona. Sebastian offered Chloe a charming practice deflection. "Of course, Chloe. Just a moment." He turned back to Noah, his eyes conveying a silent apology and a promise for later. "Soon," he mouthed before following Chloe towards Anya. That evening, ensconced in Sebastian's trailer, the generator's distant drone, the only sound, their conversation finally unfolded. The small space felt charged, alive with the unspoken things that had at last found a voice. Noah sat on the compact sofa, Sebastian perched on the edge of the table facing him. Us, Sebastian began, his voice softer than Noah had ever heard it. "It's real, beyond the script, beyond the characters. I meant what I said." Noah's heart swelled. "I know, and I feel it too, Sebastian. It's a bit overwhelming in the most wonderful way." Sebastian reached out, clasping Noah's hand again, his thumb stroking Noah's knuckles. "It changes things. Everything. Our work, this film, our lives." "I know," Noah repeated a little breathlessly. Are you scared?" Sebastian chuckled softly, a low rumble in his chest. "Terrified, excited, confused. It's a lot to process. My entire world has been so neatly compartmentalized until now. This is an unboxing." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "But I wouldn't trade it. Not for anything." Noah's chest tightened with emotion. "Me neither. But what does it mean for the film? For everything else?" "Chloe was watching us earlier." Sebastian's brow furrowed slightly. "Chloe? Yes. She's observant and protective. We'll need to be careful for now. This is ours, Noah. Not for public consumption, not yet anyway." He squeezed Noah's hand. "This connection, it's powerful. It's going to make the remaining scenes even more potent. It's a gift, in a way, for the work. But it's also a delicate thing. We need to nurture it." Noah nodded, a profound sense of relief washing over him. Sebastian wasn't shying away from the complexities, nor was he dismissing the professional implications. He was facing them head on, with a quiet determination that Noah found immensely attractive. The road ahead was uncertain, undoubtedly fraught with challenges, but with Sebastian by his side, Noah felt a burgeoning confidence he hadn't known he possessed. The future, once a vague outline, was now a vibrant, thrilling possibility.